Welcome to Healing Your Families. We're continuing our theme with supporting family members with special needs. And I am excited to have my good friend and expert, Tammy Goen. Tammy, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I want to make sure our listeners know a little bit about you. So I'm just going to take time to tell them about your background. Your background, by the way, really impresses me.
Thanks.
So as a holistic life coach, Tammy's eclectic approach encompasses skills developed through her previous counseling practice. Over 20 years of providing energy healing, certifications in EFT or tapping, and heart math meditation, and 9 years as a coach. Her work encompasses mind, body, spirit practices and includes the use of art and connection with nature, as well as mindful practices, meditation, and energy work. EFT tapping is a key component of her coaching approach, helping clients release beliefs limiting them from accessing their superpower. As a highly sensing person, she understands what it's like to navigate the non-highly sensitive world as an HSP. She loves to help her clients develop tools to minimize overwhelm, develop self-compassion and self-love, to embrace their trait and move from surviving to thriving. Her sensitivities also help her when working with non-highly sensitive clients by allowing her to understand their struggles and sense what will be helpful. So you see what I mean by an impressive background. So you have not only learned it, you have walked the road.
I have, yeah. It's anyone who identifies with being highly sensitive knows that even before you recognize that it's a trait, it's something that we always have experienced because we're born that way. It's the way we're wired. So I certainly spent my whole life until I became aware of the trait, knowing that I was super sensitive, but not knowing that that was really an okay thing. So as soon as I discovered that it was a trait, just like being left-handed or right-handed, it's like, oh, I'm wired that way. 20% of the rest of the population is also wired that way. That feels really different. So that began my journey of learning as much as I could about high sensitivity and how that, interplays with life in general. And then that eventually became my primary focus with clients.
I think this is huge for families. If you don't understand, you could easily look at someone who is highly sensitive, has this trait, and label them as being stubborn or overly sensitive or just difficult. So how old were you when you learned about this trait and identified that, hey, that's me?
Oh, I was probably about 45.
So as an adult.
Yeah. I mean, I went through, many experiences and now that, I can look back on my childhood and my early adulthood and middle adulthood up until then. And there's a lot of ahas where you go, oh, no wonder things played out this way, or I felt this way, or I heard this. Now it all makes sense. And so that really helps to reframe and, shift that mindset of not being okay to, oh, that's just the way things are. So
I think it's part of learning to accept yourself,
yes,
rather than feeling like there's something wrong with you.
Exactly.
So how valuable would this have been if, as an early child, your parents had this information and they understood?
Yeah, that would have been huge. Especially, I was fortunate. I had a very supportive and loving family and background, especially with, my grandparents involved and all of that. So I felt really supported for who I was. I would say kind of like in spite of the sensitivities, it was kind of like, oh, that's just kind of a quirky thing of Tammy's or whatever. But I never really felt overly judged for it. It was just kind of seen as an interesting thing. But some people will have that experience, either they're in a really traumatic environment or not supportive environment, or they just hear all the time that somehow they get that sense that they should just be different somehow to be okay. So yeah, learning all of that as a child would have made everything so completely different, because it would have been that, being okay with yourself along the whole path, instead of feeling like, oh, if I could just be more like everybody else, then, things would be okay. And not that, sensitivity is the only parameter that leads, kids to feel that way, of course. But yeah, that would have made a big difference if I had been able to just go, okay, right, I'm dealing with some people who can't see it from my viewpoint. So I can just kind of choose to let that go, rather than trying to figure out what do I need to do to fix it so I can be different.
That's lesson one for parents, is giving that unconditional love. It sounds like you were accepted for who you were. They just loved you. So that's the first lesson for parents, is accept your children as they are and love them unconditionally. Now, but so that they can learn these skills at an early age, what are some things parents could watch for that would indicate to them their child is highly sensing?
So one thing that's pretty across the board is a tendency to get overwhelmed sooner than others. So when there's a lot going on in the world, as there usually is, we can, and highly sensitive children can get to that place of overwhelm much sooner. So when you look around and everyone else is having a great time at the birthday party, and your child is like, can we go home? Can I go home? Or off in a corner or something like that, where you can just sense their stress level, that tends to be a common factor. And then being really, really concerned about other people and other people's feelings and the situations, and not just being concerned, with themselves. I mean, when I was 13, I went through this, my parents divorced when I was 10, and I would go see my dad every, couple weekends or something like that. And for a while, like 3 times in a row, just as I was getting ready to leave to go see him, I would get this horrible stomach ache. And I would go, and I mean, it's not that I didn't want to go, and nothing bad was happening while I was there. But after a while, my mom was like, hey, what's going on? And then I explained to her, and she prodded a little bit. And we realized that I was really concerned for my dad. I thought he was really unhappy, and that wasn't okay with me. So I'd been picking up on all that. He never said anything, but I just got this sense that he was just really miserable, unhappy. And so I picked all that up. So once we addressed it and we talked with, my mom and my dad, and he took ownership, which was great. He's, it's like, hey, I'm fine, but that's for me to worry about, not yours. Never had another stomach ache, So that tendency to be aware of others and what's going on at a much, deeper level than average is definitely another characteristic. And then just being super distracted by things that others just let go, whether it's like competing sounds, different types of music, volume, lights, even like physical things. Like, I mean, I could never have a tag in my clothes growing up. I remember when I was 6, we went through like all of the different types of soap you can possibly buy at that time, because my skin was reacting to things, and I couldn't have that soap. I couldn't have that soap. I had, whenever, and we finally narrowed it down, we found one soap that I didn't react to. So, I mean, it can be physical as well. But just, the reactions to things tends to be heightened. And then we also tend to not let things go and kind of like, overthink over and over and over on things that people have already moved on a long time ago. And that can happen with children as well, where they're just like, if they seem kind of off or distressed or whatever, and you talk with them about it, and they're like, well, I'm worried about, blah, blah, something that happened last week. Probably all the other kids are, yeah, what's the big deal? But holding on to that. So those are some key characteristics or experiences that you might run into.
Now, you just mentioned some characteristics that can be shared for children with ADHD or autism. And yet, taken overall, I can see it's not the same. Children with autism can also be highly sensitive to loud noises, bright lights, lots of people. And children with ADHD may struggle with that focus. But taken overall, that just paints a bigger picture. It's not the same, is it?
It's not the same, and like emotionally, it's usually quite different. I mean, highly sensitives tend to really thrive on connection with other people. I mean, we might be, 70% of highly sensitives are introverted. So there might be that tendency to kind of pull back, and those who are introverted totally fine, like hours in your bedroom by yourself, reading, listening to music, whatever. So not necessarily like antisocial, but sometimes that seems limited. But at the same time, we really like that deep connection and that social connection. It's just usually on a smaller scale. Instead of being in a big party, like a big birthday party, we're good with one or two friends hanging out and doing our own thing. So that can show up with children as well. So it can have a lot of, I mean, because I get questions like that all the time, well, how do you know if it's high sensitivity or ADHD or autism spectrum or whatever? And there is a lot of overlap. So it's good to research a little bit, find out a little bit more about it, take a quiz, and kind of see where all of those other things that are a factor are involved. And it's not just, but I mean, in that specific category of autism or ADHD.
Do highly sensing people tend to be people pleasers? Is it very important then that everyone be happy?
Right. Yes. And it's kind of like wanting everything to just to flow nicely and be balanced, kind of, like we don't want anyone to be upset with us. We tend to be very perfectionistic and wanting things just a certain way. And for children, that can be very frustrating. So if kids are just like, I'm trying to do this and it has to be just right. And, maybe the parents like, it's no big deal. It's just a picture. Yeah, but it was supposed to look like this, so there can be that perfectionistic kind of thing. And we want people to be happy with us and not be upset with us. We don't want them to feel upset, or so that it's like searching for that equilibrium with everything. And when that's off, we pick up on that and it doesn't make us happy. So
okay, very
so
in tune with that. So and I love that, how you were sensing your father's sadness or just worried about him, and having that conversation. Sometimes there are conversations that need to be held so our children can feel comfortable.
Exactly. And even in high school, I was always a striver, and it was all just from me. I didn't have pressure from anyone to, perform, succeed, whatever. It all came from me. I don't know why, partly from the sensitivity, probably. And so it was very, very important that I would do as much as I possibly can, and so by the time I got to my senior year in high school, I would say burned out. At the time, we didn't really use that term, and I wasn't aware of that term, but I got into my, 2 weeks into my year, and I was just overwhelmed. I mean, I was just I always loved school, and I was not enjoying going to school. And my mom sat down. She was really, I was so lucky that this happened. And so what's going on? And so we discovered that I was just so overwhelmed. And of course, I'd only needed like half of a caseload to graduate, because I'd, been progressing along. So I had filled all my extra slots with all these AP classes and, all this stuff. And she said, do you need to have all those classes? And I said, well, no, but, and she said, well, what if you just got rid of a couple? And that was like mind blowing for me. It's like, what do you mean get rid of a couple classes? But I can do that, but you don't have to. Oh, so that was huge for me too. I dropped a couple classes and spent more time like not studying and doing racquetball and, spending time with friends and that kind of stuff. Completely different experience from those, couple weeks going in, where I was thinking, oh, this year is going to be so long. And so being aware and recognizing that even if it's not what you would do in that situation. I mean, this is true for adults too, but if you're looking with, with a child, it's like, why is my child being so upset by these things that everyone else is letting go, or I wouldn't worry about? Just recognizing that, well, that's their reality. Something's going on. So if you have that conversation and say, hey, what's going on? And then not have judgment about it as, well, nobody else is worried about that. It's like, oh, well, what's that like? And tell me what that's like for you. And then what can we do that you think that would make it better? And like problem solve that rather than having that judgment is really big. Yeah.
I love it. So in addition to that, unconditional love and acceptance and the listening without judgment, just being curious, that active listening where you're focusing to understand. What other tips do you have for parents that could help support and sometimes it's the adults in the family. You weren't diagnosed or didn't find this out till you were an adult. Sometimes maybe parents need to look at themselves and say, is this me?
Exactly. And we can seem to have like a shorter temper, or, because we react to things more deeply, more, it's more likely to react to things that other people might let go. I mean, that kind of stuff as an adult working with a child, if you find yourself triggered by your child quite often, even though you look and go, well, I get, maybe that's not really any different than any other kid, but why am I having such a hard time with it? And then, you have those expectations and judgment and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it can be really challenging to be a non-highly sensitive parent with a highly sensitive child, but it can really be the reverse as well. If your child is not highly sensitive and, very active and noisy and just, not worried about things that, or you're like, hey, don't, that's driving me nuts, and they're like, what? So if you're highly sensitive and they're not, that can be triggering too. I mean, certainly across the board, no matter how those combinations happen. But so I always recommend going to Elaine Aron is the first primary researcher of this, coined the term and everything, sensory processing sensitivity, which is why highly sensitive is a lot easier. But she has her very first book is just called Highly Sensitive, the Highly Sensitive Person. But then she has one for children as well. So if you think your child is highly sensitive, whether you are or not, it would be a good thing to get that book and just familiarize yourself with, there's research in there and there's things to be aware of and how to support them. All of that kind of thing is
so
great.
it's recognizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you mentioned assessments. Now, don't you have an assessment on your website?
I do. Mine is for adults. I don't have a child version, but Elaine Aron does have one on her site, specifically for children that parents will take on behalf of their children. But yes, I've created one myself on my site for adults. So if any of the parents are thinking, maybe that's me, they can certainly go and take that and kind of get some information, off the website or whatever. And I do offer consults with parents for either, whether it's they're highly sensitive and they don't know how to manage their child who's driving them nuts because of their sensitivities, or because they think their child is highly sensitive too. Just having that guidance.
Is there information on your website about where they can find an assessment for children if they think maybe this is
I do need to have that. I have the assessment for adults, the self-inventory, but I do have a section on, like parent consults. So yeah, thank you for that. I will add a link to that since I don't have my own to have more of that information. But yeah, we can certainly, and I have free discovery calls, little one-on-one, half-hour consults that I can, if people are concerned or think, is this my child or not? I don't know. We can certainly, connect. But yeah, I'll put that on my site because that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, well, and I love that you grew up with this. What your parents did that really helped you. You learned to manage it. Now you help other people manage it, and you have a varied background. That was very impressive to me. So so basically for parents, it's the awareness. Maybe if you suspect that it's something you're struggling with, get more information, take the assessment on Tammy's website. And then if you suspect maybe this is my child, I have that background as a special ed teacher, and I know how important that getting an accurate picture, knowing what's going on with your child equips you so much better to be able to support them. Unconditional love goes a long way. That just start with that. Like you said, your mom didn't even need to be trained in this. She
Right.
just knew how to love unconditionally.
And if we have
But
time,
if they can
a couple-
provide tools and, help them accept themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, and a couple things. So, and one I immediately just forgot when I said that, but I'm gonna, if we have time, I'll just tell another quick story that just
Yes.
to enhance that idea of the acceptance without judgment and being aware of how things can affect children. So when I was, early teens, we must have had some kind of a, family gathering. My mom and both of my grandmothers were there. My sister, I think, had been there, but wasn't there. None of the men were around. It was just them. And we'd been, chatting, and I decided, okay, that's good. I'm going to go and hang out in my room and listen to my music, which I love to do. So I walked back from the living room, family room, walked down the hall. And then before I could even walk into my room, I stopped, and I just felt energetically something was off. And I don't know, I stood in the doorway, literally, I did not even go into my room. And I just scanned, and I looked all around. I'm like, okay, I don't see anything out of place. I don't think, what, I don't know what the problem is. So then I said, okay, well, more details. And I really scanned, and I had a stereo cabinet with room on each side. And I had a couple little like 3 little figurines on each side. And they always stayed in the same place. And I would dust and put them in the same spot, because it just was, kind of my calming, energy system. So I look over, and of course my brain says, that can't be right. And 2 of my figurines were swapped. No big deal, right? But for me, I wanted to know, I was curious. That's one of our things too. It's like always asking. So, kids are asking, kids like to ask questions, but if they're really curious, that could be part of the high sensitivity trait too. And I just had to know what was going on with that. So I said, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. It's no big deal. Just let it go. So I did go into my room and sat down and processed it for a minute. But then I said, oh, this is just driving me crazy, because my sister never got into my stuff. So that I knew that wasn't, a thing. So I'm like, okay, I have to go say something, just because I couldn't get it out of my head, because it was so odd. Why would that happen? Because I knew that I hadn't done it. So I turned around and, I walked back in. And as soon as I walked into where, my mom and grandmothers were, they were, chatting away, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as I got in there, silence. And then my mom says, what's up, Tim? And I'm like, well, I know this is weird. And so I explained the whole story. And before I could even finish, they all bust out laughing. And I'm sitting there going, okay, you're out in the butt of a joke, and I don't know what it is. And then I discovered that my mom had been talking with them about how sensitive I was. And she said, oh, I could change the tiniest thing and she would know. And they're like, oh, that's crazy. That, that can't be true. Oh yeah. So it was a test. So she had done that purposefully when I had been out, and this proved the thing. So they weren't laughing at me, but still I picked up all on that energy of like, oh, I'm quirky, I'm weird, no one else is like this, et cetera, et cetera. So just being aware of how, kids are sponges. We're all sponges, and so highly sensitive kids are like beyond what you can imagine as sponges. They're pulling in stuff all of the time and making tons of meaning to it, with it. That's the big things. We make a lot of meaning with everything in life. So just being aware that even if you have no negative intent toward your child, your reaction can mean something, to them. So even if you're kind of like laughing, what you would say, laughing with them, or pointing something out that you think is a quirky thing and kind of interesting, if not cool, if they keep hearing that a lot, they could have that idea that like, oh, I need to change that, that maybe that's not okay. That's a weird thing. So just, being aware that just having that total acceptance and paying attention to your own words and reactions and energy is really important.
That is so profound, and it's so true. We may think, oh, it's just a joke. But children, especially young children, are very literal. They will take us at our word. And we need to be so careful that we're not putting labels on them.
Yeah.
That they accept and then become that. So I have to ask, did you immediately switch the figurines back?
Oh, I did, because it just didn't feel right. But I had to find out why,
Yes.
because it made it, consciously, it made no sense. Why would those things be reversed when I knew I didn't? My sister wouldn't bother me, and nothing was broken, or it was just weird. So
Yeah.
I just,
That detail that was unsettling until you solved it.
yeah, and it wasn't earth shattering, but I wasn't letting it go because it made no sense, and I wanted to make sense. Because it made me, it had meaning to me, and I just didn't know.
Now, this sounds like it could be a superpower. What are the advantages of being highly sensitive?
So that is one of the things is, noticing things can be, if you have the right tools and you have the right support and all that kind of stuff, noticing things is very valuable. Highly sensitives tend to make really good leaders, and they tend to be like a really high percentage of, say, artists, singer-songwriters and musicians and, physical artists and that kind of stuff. Writers tend to be highly sensitive. So that creative side is really strong, and that detail side helps, in work, in schoolwork, in, different environments. And then again, being able to pick up on those energies, we tend to be those that, and if you think about like a child with a group in a classroom or a party or whatever, that if they're not overstimulated, they're picking up on stuff, and they kind of know what the other kids need, or that there's something, well, maybe somebody needs a hug, or there's something going on with so-and-so, and they don't know what it is, but maybe they go and spend a little extra time with them. Or the example with me and my dad, if I had approached that in a way where I'd just come at the beginning and said, I'm worried about my dad, then I never would have had the stomach upset, of course, but I was picking up on that. So that can be really helpful, as long as, we're aware of our own needs, taking care of ourselves, and making sure we have the right environment and all of that can be really helpful. And then we also tend to see all sides of situations at a deeper level. So, equality and diplomacy and that kind of stuff, we can be eventually, if you're looking at your child growing up, that could be very helpful in the workplace, or managing a business, or some kind of organization with other people, because they'll be able to say, oh, this person does better with this person does better with that. This will, if I do it this way, then everyone will be okay or happy or whatever, so there can be some of that ability to see that point of, it's always good for everyone to be able to, especially in communication, to try to see from the other person's side. That's not always, possible, because we all have different life views, but we do tend to be those that will pull that in. So those can be benefits for sure.
So it sounds like they are the peacemakers.
Quite often, yes.
It sounds like they're also very empathetic.
Yes. Yeah, and my nephew, who is definitely highly sensitive, in first grade, he got to where he didn't want to go to school anymore, and he was getting sick and doing all these things, and my sister, pursued it with him, and he was so distraught because kids at school were not nice to each other, and then when they started not being nice to the teacher, he just couldn't do it. He's like, I'm not going back. So yeah, to an extent, trying to be the peacemaker, but that sometimes that can be very, very frustrating if that's not possible. But up until then, that's definitely a benefit. Yeah.
Well, we definitely need those kind of people in our world.
We do. Yes. Yeah.
And to be aware, and my big concern is there's sometimes that notion, especially with our sons, that we've got to toughen them up. And what a valuable gift we would lose if we focused on that.
Yes. And it is more likely for boys, for men who are highly sensitive, to not only not be aware of it, but to shut down some of those traits after a while of feeling like, seeing that they're not helping. And I'm just getting all this negative input by being this way, so I better stop doing that. And then that creates a lot of angst, within themselves. So being aware specifically with boys, and allowing that to express itself, that sensitivity. That's why I like highly sensing, because that term sensitivity doesn't have a real great you
Well,
know,
in a
ideas.
highly functioning family, we allow each member to be their true self, to develop their strengths. And when that happens, then you have this cohesive whole with our various unique qualities filling in the gaps for each other.
Well said. Yes. Yeah, and just having that awareness that something could be different than what you know, and then trying to know more so that you can still be supportive, even if it's different. And a last thing I would throw out there too is that, you know, back when I was working as a counselor and I was working in the schools for a little while, and so many kids were getting the ADHD diagnosis. And now that I look back at it, I think, oh, what percentage of those kids were highly sensitive, but not ADHD? I mean, they can both coexist, but sometimes that's kind of like, oh, you know, not paying attention or getting disturbed by things must be ADHD. Yeah, it could also be highly sensitive. So, you know, for those parents that are getting, you know, talking with having their IEPs or whatever, and they're being told, oh, you know, we think that, you know, he or she has, you know, ADHD, you know, maybe pursuing a little bit on that direction of high sensitivity and seeing if that fits, and maybe that's even more appropriate.
That's like treating them for a stomach ache when they actually had a cold.
Yeah.
Let's be accurate and understand.
And the main thing is always to remember, it's nothing that needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
It's just developing tools and being able to get the environment and the support that you need. Just like, you know, left-handed person has different scissors.
Yeah.
And maybe sitting on the other end of the table is a good idea. So you accommodate, but not expect them to change, because there's nothing wrong with being left-handed.
Right.
There's
Right.
nothing wrong with being highly sensitive. We just have to have the right tools and understanding and help people to learn. And, you know, so just educating so people realize, like, oh, okay, it's a difference, different than me, different than left-handed or right-handed or whatever.
Yeah, this is huge. We need this diversity. Okay, now tell me, it looks like you have a book behind you. So
Oh, I do. That's my most recent. I've co-authored in a couple different books. That's the most recent that's just come out. And so both of them are, you know, pertaining to my story. The most recent one is all about self-love for the highly sensitive person. Yeah. So
you're an author. They can reach you through your website and take that assessment, learn about the services you offer. What's the best way for people to contact you?
you know, the easiest overall is on Linktree, linktr.ee/ and then my name, so TAMMYGOEN, and because that just has everything on there. It's got my website, it's got all the, you know, all the different resources on there. We'll
put that link in the description so they can find you through that. And Tammy, thank you so much. This is valuable information for families. You know, we quite often we have our first child, we think we've got it all figured out, and then we have the second one. Or so understanding, you know, loving them unconditionally, understanding them, learning, and then helping them recognize their strengths and feel good about that, about what they have to offer the world. This is huge. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I always just love sharing. It's awesome. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, I know you help a lot of people. So thank you, Tammy. For my viewers, join us again next week. We will have an autism advocate as our guest, and we'll learn more about that unique challenge. So until then, love yourself, love your families. Let's make the world a better place by strengthening families. This is Emmylou Penrod with healingyourfamilies.com.